And Drew, how about this topic? You sent this one to me last week, and I find this pretty fascinating. How about this? Records obtained by the USA Today show that Deion Sanders has never had to leave campus to seal the deal for any players. So high school commitments. What we're saying here is Deion Sanders primetime has had 0 in-home visits. The university confirmed that Coach Prime has made no off-campus contacts with recruiting prospects since he was hired there in early December 2022. When you sent me that, I didn't really know how to react to it. It really kind of caught me by surprise. But Drew, I mean, your thoughts on this, and I'll give you kind of my take now that I've had a couple of days to stew on it. But when you heard this, what was your reaction to it?
It's kind of wild. But I brought this up back when he flipped Travis Hunter from Florida State to Jackson State. I said, I think Prime did this without an in-home visit. Now, Travis Hunter took a low-key official to Jackson State when he was committed to Florida State, but there was no Prime time showing up at Travis Hunter's house there outside of Atlanta. So I guess I'm not surprised, but to see it in writing and then to see that, I don't know, there hasn't really been a ton of media coverage of this. Like the USA Today, got the records request and put this out there. And I think it's kind of a big deal. I'll say this, Cooper. I think Deion is ahead of the curve, right? How many more in-home visits with head coaches are we really going to get with where the NCAA is going in terms of, right, they moved the early signing period up to the first week of December, right? The season runs through Thanksgiving weekend. I mean, unless you got a ridiculous NetJets account or your school owns a plane, like how are you going to go see all your recruits? Like, I think the in-home visits for college coaches are gone. They're dead, especially if we get the summer signing period, unless they allow those guys to go out on the road in May and April and all that stuff. But, we keep saying it's going to more of an NFL model. The recruitment's done. It's more of an interview process. And I think Deion, I don't know if he meant to do this, but he might have been ahead of the curve a little bit.
I think you always bring up the point, like, all right, the college game is kind of following the NFL model. And when you bring that up, you talk about the top 30 visits a lot. I think when you evaluate this, you have to be really careful. You have to evaluate Deion Sanders in a vacuum. And I think there are a lot of different variables that you have to weigh. I think the other thing is he's been dealing with a pretty serious injury that's been nagging him for quite some time. I think you have to take that into consideration. I mean, at some point, I think a lot of people thought that Deion Sanders was going to lose his foot. The other thing is Deion Sanders has a very unique style of recruiting. I think the other part is his first year, they took 51 transfers. They had 20 plus high school signees. This past year, they only had 7 signees when it came to high school. So when you evaluate that a little bit, sure, would you like if I was Corey Phillips, the director of player personnel at Colorado, would it make me feel a little bit better when you're going toe-to-toe with Dan Lanning and the Ryan Day and the Kirby Smarts of the world for a guy like Jordan Seaton? Would it make me feel a little bit more comfortable if Deion Sanders was on the road in a house, in a living room, looking eye to eye with a player like Jordan Seaton? For sure. But that being said, this is not really Deion Sanders. It's never been his style. This is not who he is. Not to say that it's right or wrong. I just don't have that much of an opinion on it really at the end of the day, because they seem to make their hay in college. And quite honestly, Deion Sanders, his reputation, how strong it is, they've had no issues in terms of being one of the most robust transfer portal programs over the last 2 years. I think he showed that. That being said, I do think it's a little bit of a vulnerability in high school when you do go up for players like Jordan Seaton. I mentioned him, Draylon Miller, Cam Michael, all guys that they signed, by the way, but you wonder how many got away, and you wonder how many thought to themselves, well, hey, I got Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Ryan Day in my living room, yet this other coach that's recruiting me, I have no face-to-face relationship with him other than my official visit to Boulder, right? So I think there maybe you leave yourself open to interpretation a little bit. But outside of that, Andrew, I really have no issue with it.
I mean, I don't have an issue with it. It's working. You go to the 2023 cycle, they signed the 30th best high school class. This past year, you said it, only took 7 guys. That finished 119th behind a number of group of 5 programs, but the focus was the transfer portal. That's the other thing, right? You want to talk about the NCAA tournament. I don't know how much college basketball you follow, Cooper, but all these teams that didn't get into the tournament that had NIT invitations, right? They could have played in that term. They turned them down. Like Rick Pitino wanted to get out on the road and recruit and start working the transfer portal, which opened up on Monday. So I think it's a little bit of that. And then my other thought that pops into my head, and I don't know if this is true, but I always heard the rumors, like if you were going to take an official visit to Hawaii, like there had to have been some understanding that you were really considering it, right? Because I don't know, you've been asked that question. You can take 5 official visits. Where do you want to go? Hawaii is always one of them. You want to go out, see the island, fly out there. But Hawaii doesn't want to host 120 official visitors. They want the guys that want to be there for the right reasons. To me, Deion Sanders, you go in home with one kid, then all the recruits are going to want that. And it seems like this generation of student athletes relates to Prime. I think it skipped me and you. But these kids, they look up to him. So I think it says a lot. And the fact that he could reel in Jordan Seaton, Cormani McClain a few cycles ago. We mentioned Travis Hunter. There's other guys. Dylan Edwards, that was a flip from Notre Dame. Draylon Miller. He's gone head to head, and he hasn't had to use that in-home visit. I just wonder how many other coaches have that type of pull.
Not many. And, I encourage people in the chat, especially if you have a question, comment, criticism, that is the place to put it. We already have one. Ryan says, awful take. If any other coach than Deion Sanders had a horrible high school class and wasn't doing visits, people would be calling for their job. What if Harsin did the same? Brian Harsin is not Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is the most marketable head coach in college football history. I mean, we're talking about a guy with his own Amazon Prime show. He's different, right? And you have to admit that, whether you like it or not, in terms of the hype train, Deion Sanders, we saw that in full force in the first 4 weeks of the season in college football last year. I get it. You might not like it. That being said, if there is one person that can kind of skirt the system, it would be Deion Sanders. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make here. He's one of one in this scenario. And guess what? If there's 129 other FBS coaches that might not be able to do that, that's the whole point that we're trying to make about Deion Sanders. So pretty fascinating. We'll see what happens. The other part about this, like I said, you look at the talent composition, how they build their roster there in Boulder, a lot of it through the collegiate ranks. So how much of an emphasis actually is the in-home visit for Deion Sanders? The other thing I would say, last thing I would say on this is I hope that they're being productive with the time that they are not spending on the road in terms of being in a living room with some of these high school players, and we'll see what happens. So certainly fascinating, certainly an enigma when it comes to Deion Sanders, and something that I think we will be keeping our eye on in the future. Guys, I said it earlier, you can find us on X now. You can also find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. New time, our first time last week, launching the new time, 11 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Eastern will also be on X. Guys, we appreciate you joining us as always. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe.